Welcome back. I wanted to bring back this series for a while. I just never really had the, motivation to do it or something of the sort. I don't really know what the right word is, but regardless, I did want to bring this back for a good amount of time. I did bring back the 101 series, and I think the reason why I kept this one on the back burner for so long was because looking at it, there is a lot of overlap between the two. But nevertheless, I wanted to try this again, and hopefully if people do like this, I can bring this back maybe once or twice every week, and then maybe have a poll on what units you guys want to see for the next one or next two, but I'm getting ahead of myself. The Let's Find a Niche series essentially is a series where I take a look back at older units that probably aren't really used and maybe just got a refine, and basically give them a highlight reel and some builds and some comparisons depending. And I figured what better unit to bring this back with than Thea, who recently got a refine, and a lot of people are very happy with it. So I figured I'd give my fair share of thoughts on it, give some recommended builds, both budget and premium, and then do some comparisons. So if this is something you want to see more of in the future, make sure to let me know down below. Also, make sure to like and subscribe. And with that, we may as well get started. Thea overall is rather balanced stat-wise. She doesn't really have anything she necessarily excels in. She does have 31-35 attack speed, which isn't the worst by any means offensively, especially with her refine. And then 31-28 defense res, which actually gets bolstered quite significantly again because of her refine. Speaking of which, her refine grants an assortment effects depending on how many dragon flowers she has on her. If she has 0 dragon flowers, she gets +4 to everything. If she has at least 1, she gets +5 instead. If she has 5 dragon flowers, she gets guard as well. And if she has 10 dragon flowers or more, she gets +6 attack and defense visibly for 1 turn, which can actually be really good for self-sufficiency. And then her special refine grants her an additional +4 to everything, and bonus doubler if she is within 3 spaces of an ally, which basically turns her into a massive stat ball, and overall inflates her relatively balanced stat line into something much more significant. The kicker with the refine though is that you may or may not have the dragon flowers to invest into her, depending on how many you usually spend or save, or how many units you pull, or depending on whether or not you're new or old to the game. It really does depend, because 10 dragon flowers can be a lot to ask for, especially on someone like Thea. Thankfully though, the visible buffs can always be replicated by something else entirely, whether that's a link skill, or a rally, or whatever the sort may be. The only thing she may just miss out on is the guard effect, but that's not necessarily the worst thing to lose out on, since at the end of the day, the most important thing from her weapon are her stats and the bonus doubler effect. If you want to use her on budget, I highly suggest giving her something like Quick Riposte and some sort of skill that boosts her visible speed and res, so that way she could get +6 to everything visibly without any sort of external support. That being said, you could always use something like a rally or a dance from a legendary Azure or whatever the case may be, and get her visible buffs going up that way instead, but this is just more for self-sufficiency. I gave her Moonbow simply because of the fact that it will be easy to trigger on every combat because she is relatively fast. I also gave her Attack Defense 4 since she will want to be near allies, so it would make sense to give her some sort of skill that has a leash and has a higher ceiling for stats. Attack Defense Form can grant up to 7+ attack and defense, so it's actually quite decent for someone like her. The only difference mainly between the first 2 builds is going to be the Speed Res Oath and the Speed Res Link. Speed Res Link does require an action, while Speed Res Oath does just require you being adjacent, which it should be fine regardless, simply because of the fact that she wants to be near allies anyway. And then depending on the build you use, I gave her Quick Riposte in both her B and her S. The reason that we're giving her Quick Riposte is mainly so she can bypass any sort of impact effect, because with this enemy phase flyer set, she won't have the ability to bypass impact effects because she lacks the necessary skills otherwise. That being said, you do have a higher ceiling for stats depending on the set you use. If you use the Speed Res Oath set, you could give her attack speed form and bolster her stats even more, while using the Speed Res Link set will allow her to use something like Attack Smoke, meaning that she can actually debuff and essentially get +7 defense and res, which isn't bad at all. Of course, if you want to use something a lot more premium, you can give her attack defense unity with guard bearing, The reason we're giving her Unity is because it will synergize quite well with the visible buff she grants to herself. So on the off chance she is hit by panic, she can actually just reverse the debuffs and still get the bonus stats. She also has guard bearing simply for enemy face strategies, so she's taking less damage overall, but you could always just keep quick riposte simply because she will want to have some sort of ability to double regardless of the foe's skills. And attack speed rain is so she can not only double more often but tank more often, and then attack speed form again just so she gets extra stats. This is more of a melee specialist build, so you don't really have to worry about something like Iochio because she will be paired up with a far save. Of course, you could also make her a bit more player phasey with attack speed catch 4, trace, and speed defense rhyme, and a solo. A solo is perfectly fine simply because she has that 3 space limit, which is really flexible for units in general. The idea here is that she does get a bunch of stats from attack speed catch 4, at minimum 7 and at most 9, which is a pretty big jump, and it should be easy to do, especially when paired with a unit that can inflict penalties on foes. Trace is there so you can get in and get out and maintain the proximity effect, and speed defense run is just so her offensive capabilities are much larger. Now Thea overall is rather interesting as a unit simply because she is mixed phased in many regards. She can perform really well in the player phase and the enemy phase, but she is rather comparable in those two roles to units like Voltaire and Altena. Voltaire has a Slaying Fury Lance that grants additional stats based on whether or not he is below 100% HP or if the foe has a penalty, while Altena has a weapon that neutralizes any sort of bonuses to attack and defense, inflicts -5 attack and defense on the foe, and has an absurd amount of defense to boot. The key takeaway with Thea between these two is that while Thea may not have slaying of any sort, she does have a lot more stats to work with comparatively to Voltaire, simply because of the fact that she gets +9 to everything and she has bonus doublers, so her ceiling is much larger than Voltaire's, but the lack of slaying can make it difficult for something like Gale Force, especially on that 3 space limit, unless you use her with Wings and Mercy strategies, but that means she loses out on stuff like Flow Guard and Flow Refresh, so it may not necessarily be the best option. You may as well just keep her with Trace and then keep her within 3 spaces of an ally. Meanwhile, with Altena, she has a remarkable amount of attack and defense, but Thea does have a speed to boot, which means she can double more naturally. And in the off chance that there is an impact effect, Altena will struggle more, simply because she doesn't have nearly as much speed, while Thea can still make a speed check. So they are still rather comparable, but ultimately Icy Meltet has a higher ceiling for stats overall, simply because of the bonus doubler effect and the +9 that she gets to everything. But even so, if I had to rank her between all the other Lance Flyers, I would say she's definitely one of the best Lance Flyers you could invest into at the moment, but Voltaire and Altena are not bad candidates whatsoever. And that's pretty much it for Thea. It's been a while since I did anything of the sort with this series, so I'm a bit rusty when it comes to the overall content of the video, but if there's something you'd like to see in future videos, I would highly recommend just leaving a comment down below because that's the best way I get this feedback. But even so, this was my Let's Find a Niche video for Thea. If you enjoyed it, make sure to like and subscribe and leave a comment with some feedback, whether it's good or bad, depending. I want to hear it. Just give me all sorts of feedback. And until next time, see you later.